Hey, hi, hello. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm guessing you clicked on this video because you're interested in some patterns. Today I have 30 patterns to go through with you for hand-dyed yarn and variegated yarn. If you're someone that has maybe a hand-dyed yarn subscription, maybe you've been collecting yarn, maybe you have a stash of variegated yarn that you just don't know what to do with, you're in luck. Today I have patterns for home, I have blankets, I have wearables, and I have a fourth category of other. Why am I making this video? Well, I was inspired because recently I bought this yarn and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with it. It took me a while to narrow down a pattern that I was happy with using this beautiful yarn with, and I figured that there are probably other crocheters or knitters in the same dilemma as me, and that's how this video came about. So first up, we're starting with the home section. So the first three patterns are by Nautical Crochet. They typically do a lot of homeware, blankets, cushion covers, but I believe they also do exclusive hand-dyed yarn drops themselves. So what better creator to pick a pattern from when they already work with hand-dyed yarn? So this first cushion was the one that caught my eye initially. This is using a Starburst granny square, and these have been really popular and continue to be really popular, but I just thought that the color combinations that they've used, and then they have edged and done a border with a cream to really make those colors stand out, looked beautiful. Also, this looks so simple to do. If you've ever done a Starburst granny square, it's so easy, and once you've memorized how to do it, once you've done it twice, you kind of get the hang of it. This is really like beginner friendly. And then the other two, this one here again is a Starburst cushion but without the border, so you've just got the colors as kind of standalone. So if you have mini skeins that you need to use up, or you have a couple of hand-dyed yarn hanks that you don't know what to do with, this could be a great option. And then the third version is just a smaller variant. So it's not the Starburst granny square, but it is a form of a granny square because you still have the border. And I just think the color combinations look really dreamy. They look gorgeous. Next up is this mandala pattern. You can find so many of these, but I picked this one because I thought it was beginner friendly. It looked relatively simple, but really, really effective, and I love the colors that they've used. This would look great with mini skeins, or if you just had one hank of hand-dyed yarn or variegated yarn across this, I think it would look gorgeous, and you could hang it up, or you could use it as a placemat or a table mat. There's quite a few possibilities for this, and especially if you're a beginner crocheter, this could help branch out if you're not quite ready to move to something massive that has loads of different stitches. This might be the project for you. Next up is this turtle tapestry. Took me a minute to get that out. Yes, it's just using block color at the minute, but I thought if you had variegated yarn or a hand-dyed hank that was greens, blues, grays, even like whites and creams, imagine this, the turtle part of the tapestry in that hand-dyed yarn. It would look stunning. And you could even swap out the block color at the back. So they've used cream here, but you could use a deeper color. You could use a blue, you could use a black, you could even use like a variegated black yarn in the back that maybe had some speckles in, and then more of a solid hand-dyed yarn color for the turtle. Next up are these mandala cushions that I just thought were adorable. The possibilities are endless with this if you want to use up mini skeins of hand-dyed yarn, or if you have a big cake of variegated yarn. Normally when you buy something like Hobie Tea Time or Sidar Jewel Spun, there's normally quite a lot of meterage in it, and so you could use that to make something like a cushion cover in this mandala print. And then along the cushion line, just not circular but square, is this granny cushion, which I thought, again, if you use a variegated yarn for this, I think the outcome would look really striking. And this design looks so simple because you've got this circular granny stitch in the middle, and then they've just extended it out with the border. I also like the look of the one at the back because it seems like the main motif has been stretched over a side of a cushion, and I haven't seen that before, and so that was really intriguing. Next up are these mosaic baskets. If you have yet to branch into mosaic crochet, I am one of those people, but I am desperate too. This might be a really good place to start instead of going into like a big blanket. I really like that the pattern is repetitive and that you're using a base color, a main color, and then the brown, gray or blue you can switch out for something that you are happy with. The only thing to bear in mind with this would be just the fiber content of the yarn that you're using. So on this listing, they've used it as like a plant pot cover, which is a great idea. But if you're using like a merino wool variegated or hand-dyed yarn, then it's going to be really soft and it might not hold up, especially if it's getting wet. But if you have something more sturdy, maybe a cotton variegated yarn or an acrylic variegated yarn, it might hold up a little bit better for something like this. Moving on to blankets. This blanket I have seen so many times recommended to me, and I've seen a couple of other crochet YouTubers making this, and I love it. I am, at some point this year or next year, I'd really like to have a go at this one. There are several other patterns that this kind of pattern repeat incorporates, and I've included some others in the other categories in this video. So here in this picture, they have used several different colors for the hearts and then a base color, but I think that could easily be switched out for a variegated yarn on the hearts. This is also perfect for this time of year, or if it took you a month to make, perfect for October, for cozying up under, snuggling up under, watching a good film and drinking a hot chocolate. The next one is this Cosmos Mosaic blanket. So this may be a little bit more challenging than the basket or the hat that I showed previously, but I think that this design is stunning, and something about it reminds me of autumn and winter depending on the colors that you use. It looks like leaves, but it also looks like a snowflake, so I think if you chose your colors right, this would look gorgeous. It appears to be a repeat motif, and so once you have learned the basic kind of stitch, I think this would be quite quick to work up. And the color combinations and possibilities are endless. They've used a kind of creamy white as a base. You could have more autumnal colors like browns, greens, burnt oranges running through the motif, and then a darker, more solid color for the background. And then the last blanket here is again beginner friendly, and it's that starburst pattern again, but I really liked the colors of this one. It's not like typically autumnal or wintry, but you could switch it out for whatever colors that you were interested in. This is a baby blanket version, so it's a little bit smaller. It would make a perfect gift, but you could use up a couple of hanks of hand-dyed yarn for the main motifs and then pick a background color again. So I was just going to show you that I have done a blanket like this before, where I used up some mini skeins of hand-dyed yarn and some bigger hanks where I made like 10 to 12 different motifs from one hank. I made a big blanket here that has a mix of solid colors and hand-dyed variations as well. This is my favorite blanket that I've ever made, and I cannot recommend it enough. Very similar in essence to the nautical cushions and starburst blankets that I have included in this roundup. Moving into wearables. So this first one is a bag, which I'm casting as a wearable and not other, because technically you wear it on your shoulder. But here's this heart pattern again. Like I said, it does crop up a couple of times when you search for this pattern. There are scarves in this pattern as well, but I really liked this bag. I really liked the simplicity of it and the color combinations. This is smaller, obviously, than the blanket, and so if you had mini skeins or a smaller amount of variegated yarn, you could definitely make this one up. This next pattern is one that I have been tempted by for a long time, and when I bought my hand-dyed yarn recently, this was a pattern that I was debating doing. I haven't seen a pattern like this before. I love the fact that it's just the sleeves that carry the main motif and their body is a solid color. I think it's really effective. I think it's a little bit different. I think it draws attention to the right places and makes an impact. Again, color combinations are endless. You could use 1 to 2 hand-dyed hanks for this. It's going to use a lot less yarn than if you were doing your whole jumper in these motifs like traditionally a granny square jumper is done. It's also perfect for this time of year when it's starting to get a little bit colder. Another jumper that incorporates the same motif but repeated is this granny boho sweater. Again, this one appealed to me because the blue sunburst squares are intermittent, so you don't need to have a lot of your hand-dyed yarn in order to make this. You need more of a solid base color, And then the star of the show ultimately is that hand-dyed yarn because it stands out from the base color that you're choosing. I also like the edging on this, on the sleeves and the neckline and at the bottom of the top. I think it just looks a bit more floaty and a little bit more relaxed. Then we have these herringbone socks. When I tell you I've been searching for a crochet sock pattern for like 3 years, this might be the one to finally convince me to try some socks. If you're a knitter, you probably already know that a hand-dyed hank of yarn is perfect for a pair of socks. So why not just transfer that to crochet? These ones I was drawn to mainly because of the colors of the image, but also I like the texture of it. When I was reading through the reviews and also the description, it does say that it's a very easy pattern to get to grips with and it's made to measure. Next up is a pattern that I keep seeing everywhere. They've been popular for quite a number of years. Personally, I think I'm too old to pull them off, but I'm including them here in case this is something that you would like. Because it's just sleeves, this is not going to take a lot of yarn. So if you have a small amount of variegated or hand-dyed yarn left, these sleeves would be perfect to make. These might look a little bit more summery as well, but there's absolutely nothing stopping you from wearing something longer sleeved or kind of like a turtleneck underneath a pair of sleeves. So they could also work for the winter months as well. Next we have these mitts. Again, I was drawn to these for the simplicity of the design, but they look beautiful. I haven't really seen this stitched pattern before, and I think there's a thumb hole as well. So they're kind of fingerless gloves, but they're also going to keep the bottom of your arms warm. I think these would be really great in any weight size yarn as well. If you made them really chunky and thick, then they're just going to keep you that little bit warmer, or if you want to make them a little bit more intricate and use a thinner weight yarn, then that would also work with these as well. Next up is this gorgeous headband where they're already using a variegated yarn anyway, so it gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. Again, as we move to the colder months, this would be perfect to keep your ears warm, and the color possibilities would be endless. If you have a DK or a chunky merino hand-dyed yarn, this would look stunning, and you wouldn't even have to keep it to just the middle being variegated. You could make the whole headband in your choice of yarn. And then along a similar line, I have another headband pattern. I really loved the stitch on this one particularly, and whilst they've used solid colors, again, imagine this in a variegated yarn or a hand-dyed yarn. The image shows this in different thicknesses, which I think is really great, so you can adjust it to whichever size that you're happy with. And also these would make perfect gifts. You're coming up towards the latter part of the year and you want something to make a friend or something for Christmas when we finally get there. This might be a really nice present for them. Then we have this scarf. This version that they've chosen as the main image I think is gorgeous. These colors are just perfect for this time of year and would even last you through until December and January when it's still cold. This is a perfect example of the effects that you can get with a variegated yarn when you use it on the right pattern. This stitch is gorgeous and it's repetitive, so I imagine once you've learnt a couple of rows, you can carry on and continue and not have to think too much about the construction. I particularly like the ends of the scarf as well with that crocheted ribbing. I think it looks really effective. Then we have this top, which is already shown in a variegated yarn, and I think it looks beautiful. This is a bit more pastel-y and kind of feels a bit more summery, but depending upon the yarn fiber that you use, this could be a little bit thicker and actually be a little bit warmer. And again, what's stopping you from wearing a long sleeve top underneath something like this? I think the stitch looks really effective. I think it's going to be quite simple, and the ribbing detail on the neckline I think really finishes this one off. Another simple yet really effective pattern that I think looks lovely are bandanas, and this one in particular. This uses a simple granny stitch and then the edges I believe are picot. This is a really great beginner friendly pattern, and again, imagine this in a hand-dyed yarn. It would look gorgeous. I've shown you some mitts previously, but what about these fingerless gloves? This looks like a shell stitch, but it also looks slightly raised on the borders around it. I think these are stunning and something I definitely want to have a go at making towards the end of this year. Another bag is this flower bag, which is a variant of the granny square again. You could use up scraps of variegated yarn, you could use up smaller hand-dyed skeins to create this. Just imagine having a base color and then all of the flower petals are different skeins of hand-dyed yarn. This variant here is a little bit more summery, but you could mold it to something a bit more autumnal, a bit more wintry, or keep it as it is. Last two for wearables, we've got this scrunchie, which is shown in variegated yarn and I think is really effective. I feel like I personally forget that I can make scrunchies. Like, I forget as a crocheter what we can actually make, and this is gorgeous. A variegated yarn or a hand-dyed yarn that's really soft, so it's a bit more gentle on your hair. It's a perfect gift idea. I think in terms of the stitch combination, this will just be like a single crochet around a hairband, and then it looks like double or treble crochets to make the ruffles. And then last one for wearables is this mosaic hat. Similar to the pots that we talked about before, this one I imagine would be quite a good beginner pattern for mosaic crochet. I think the fiber content would matter less than when you're making the baskets. Imagine this in a hand-dyed like merino superwash for where that like block blue and ochre color is. Then you could have a base that matched, or you could do it the other way around and have the hand-dyed yarn as the border and then a solid color in the middle sections. Then you could even make a pom-pom out of the variegated yarn to finish it off. On to the last category, which is other. So these didn't quite fit into the other ones, but I think they're really worth a mention. So the first one is this crochet pouch. This appears to be a bundle and there are several different designs. There are different stitches, there's tapestry, there's mosaic crochet. It's like a feast for testing out different stitches and patterns. The color combinations that they suggest are great and I think would match anybody's preferences. And a pouch's uses are infinite. So you could have a makeup bag, you could have a pencil case, you could use it as a project bag for your crochet or something to store your hooks and notions in. I really love these. So this next one, whilst it's not a finished piece, it's a motif that I think you can do a lot of things with, and that's this heart motif. Very similar to the flower bag that I spoke about before. If you were to use up variegated yarn or your hand-dyed yarn in the heart part of this motif, you could make a bag, you could make a pouch, you could make a blanket, you could make so many things with this. In terms of construction, I think it's a lot of double crochets, and I don't actually believe that this would take very long to work up either. This second to last one, please don't hate me for it. I know it's not Christmas yet, I wish it was, but this is just for, you know, the eager planners, or if you want one of these for yourselves. But again, a variation of like a granny stitch and a starburst stitch. These stockings I think are adorable. They are already using a variegated yarn, at least on the ribbing of one of the stockings, and the flecks of colour I think are really effective. I think we typically think of like a stocking in solid colours and greens and reds, whereas this one feels a little bit more rustic, and you could personalize it to whatever's in your stash or whatever colors you like. And then this last pattern, which I think is genius and is probably my favorite one of the whole bunch, which is saying something because I love all of them. This dog jacket, such a simple construction. I really love the buttons on the front. It's granny squares to keep your dog warm in the colder months. I would love to make this for my dog Willow, but I think it would take a lot of yarn because she's very big and not as tiny as the dog shown here. You could use a solid base colour and then variegated yarn for the granny square middle, or again do it the other way around and have the variegated yarn as the main block colour and then the granny squares as solid. That's it. That's my 30 patterns to use for hand-dyed or variegated yarn. Which one was your favourite? Let me know. If you like this video and you want to stick around and see a bit more from me, please consider liking and subscribing. You'd be joining a great community of crocheters and crafters. You can also check out my other social media handles on my YouTube profile. Thanks again for joining, and I'll see you in the next one.